people published their phones in the old days. But it's not the cell phone number that they're interested in, it's the tracking information. Your BlackBerry, you ever notice it goes off and suddenly there's a map on the screen telling you exactly where you're walking? That's the information they're interested in. So if they get that tracking information, they can follow you. So if you're at the G20 and you're walking through a crowd, they can take a snapshot of all those cell phone identifiers and then they can start to follow you. Now, they will not need a warrant. And that is very disturbing. Thank you.
Interested in the liberal point of view.
C'est quoi la chose qui vous inquiète?
Ben, c'est le scénario de 1984.
Well, it's the 1984 scenario and the fact that they're giving too much power to the police, to security, to verify people's transactions on the internet or in their email. And there are a lot of people who believe that it isn't necessary to have this legislation, which is really overstepping the bounds. There could be some abuse, that's clear. Because if someone without a mandate, without a warrant, can go and check up on someone because they believe that person has committed a crime or is involved in something illegal, that could lead to abuse. Now, if there's a warrant each time, which is the case when the police wants to get into your house, that's acceptable. But it's important to have those safety mechanisms in place. And the other thing that we don't like is the fact that Mr. Harper, as you may recall, talked about Mr. Martin as being someone who sympathized with pedophiles. We heard that out of the mouth of Vic Taves, who said, either you're with us or you sympathize with pedophiles and people who are involved in child pornography. That is quite frankly insulting, and it's typical of this government. If you're not with us, then you're against us.
You don't sound like you think it's necessary. So what do you think is going on?
I definitely remain to be convinced that this bill is necessary because there are people who are coming out and saying, no, we already have measures in place. If the government decides to go ahead with it, and I think they're backing away a little bit at the moment, but they haven't quite backed away, then we have to make sure that any time that police authorities are going to be looking at somebody's private email or that they want to potentially track somebody's whereabouts who has a cell phone, that a warrant must be obtained and that warrant must clearly be submitted to a judge or to substantiate that this is indeed a very serious potential criminal activity that's undergoing. We're not convinced that it's not going to lead to abuses, and a lot of things need to be defined. Is there a, if you like, a time limit on when somebody's correspondence or email traffic is being monitored, or is it open-ended, that kind of thing? So it's not just the issue of getting the warrant, it is also the issue of putting time limits and verifications every once in a while that it is still acceptable to continue to monitor an individual's activities. We're worried about the 1984 scenario. This is a government that told us we can't make the census compulsory anymore because it might infringe on people's privacy. They shouldn't be forced under threat of going to jail or threat of paying a few $100s to reveal information that they don't want to reveal. This is a government that said we've got to protect the privacy of our law-abiding hunters, for example, those who have long guns. And yet, in this particular instance, they're riding roughshod over the privacy, the personal rights of individuals. That's what concerns us about this bill.
What makes you think the government's backing down?
Un exemple concret là, que les Canadiens devraient craindre.
Is there a concrete example that Canadians should be concerned about? Yes, the possibility that without your knowledge, the police is looking at your email correspondence without you knowing about it, because they think that you may be involved in a criminal activity, and that this could go on for a long time. And that the permission is given the police to do this without their being required to get a judicial warrant. Now, why would it bother you that the police read your email? Well, would it bother you that someone might be infringing your privacy as an individual and looking at your private correspondence?
à votre amoureux, à vos enfants,
you
à
know
ces
what you
personnes-là.
say to your
Moi,
lover or your
franchement,
children or your
ça me
friends?
fâche beaucoup.
I mean, I certainly would not like that.
Well, first of all, you said you think they might be backing down. What makes you think they might be backing down?
Well, I think they're starting to hedge a little bit and to say that, well, yes, maybe we will start to look at the issue of warrants and maybe we'll tighten up when it's possible to do it and for how long and when it has to be reviewed. I think they're beginning to realize that there's a huge indignation and outcry against what they're proposing to do.
What's the worst case scenario for you then? Like, I guess you're suggesting that people can be, unbeknownst to us, the government could be spying on our private correspondence and so on. Like, what are you alarmed about?
I'm alarmed at the fact that there can be abuse in the system whereby my private life is being examined because somebody suspects that I may be up to some criminal activity. And that I find highly disturbing. Now, I'm not against, allowing our police to do their job, but that is why it is very, very important to put in place the requirement for a warrant whenever somebody's private information is going to be examined.
Can I just ask you, perhaps just in a separate talk, about Mr. Trudeau's comments to a French Radio Canada interviewer? Yeah, you probably understand.
I'm not going to comment. You'll have to speak to Justin on that.
We're taking Quebec out of the country if
I have said very, very clearly for years I'm going to fight to keep Quebec in Canada because that's the way I feel about it. And, I think you'll have to talk to Justin and he can perhaps put it in context for you.
On the issue of conservatives constantly saying either you're with us or you're against us, you're either with us or you're against
Or you
the victims.
sympathize with the child pornographers.
Use this type of
No, it
tactic.
isn't. You're either a terrorist or a child pornographer, or you sympathize with them whenever you're against what the government wants to do. Frankly, the level of discourse in this parliament, when somebody like Vic Taves is allowed to say that kind of thing. Now, I know that, when the Prime Minister's away, the mice will play, but, the kind of things that we've been hearing in the last week or so, everybody's heard about them. We're talking about, the warning shots. We're talking about lengths of rope in cells. We're talking about Hitler. This place is getting a little bit out of control, if you ask me.
But it seems like it's a tactic on their part to sort of demonize the opposition.
They can go ahead and think that it's a tactic, but I think at some point Canadians will find it a little bit revolting and it'll have to cease. And I'm sure that Harper is going to have a talk with his caucus on this. At least I suggest he does, because frankly, it's starting to look stupid now.
So what do you make of the government saying, look, if you haven't committed a crime or you're not doing anything suspicious, what would you care?
I don't like the idea of anybody checking up on me, whether I'm guilty or not. If I'm guilty, I accept it that they're doing their job. But if I'm not guilty and I discover that somebody's snooping on me, I find that. We're not living in a totalitarian state. We're not living in the 1984 scenario. We do believe in freedoms in this country, and things have to be done. Yes, crime has to be pursued, but it has to be done in a reasonable and in a way that it holds even the police to account.
So you're saying Canadians really should be worried about this bill?
Yes, I do, and Canadians are. If you go and look on the websites and see what's going on, Canadians are getting very worried about what this government is proposing.
And last question.
Just from the Lobby Monitor and looking at the advocacy perspective, you said that it seemed that the government was backing down on some aspects. Do you think that public advocacy has had something to do with that?
I think public pressure is having an effect, and we'll see what the final form of the bill is. This government doesn't like to back down. Sometimes it does back down, but it doesn't like to give the impression that it has backed down. But if you look at it closely, they've changed things a little bit. We'll see what the final form of this bill turns out to be. Thank you.
I have some comments based on the fact that I was invited by the Minister for Public Safety to a briefing to learn about this act before tabling. We were told that its short title was to be, and I'll quote from my briefing, it was supposed to be short title, quote, Protecting Children from Internet Predators Act. We were not provided with any copies of the legislation in the briefing, nor were we provided with any written notes. They told us that they couldn't provide it because the wrong version of the Act had been brought to the briefing. And I went to the opposition lobby to find my copy of the Act and find that its short title is the Lawful Access Act. So I'm at this point confused as to what bill is being tabled. We were briefed by members of the minister's staff, Mark Johnson, representative of the Public Safety Department, Michelle Kingsley, and someone from the Department of Justice, and the entire briefing took place telling us that the name of the act was the, quote, Protecting Children from Internet Predators Act, unquote. I asked questions such as, is the use of the information which can be obtained through this online spying bill to be restricted only to crimes that involve child pornography? And the answer was no, it can be used for any investigation. So at this point, I have a paper copy of a bill that differs in a substantial way from the briefing from the minister's office and two departments, the Department of Justice, the Department of Public Safety. That said, there are parts of what was described in the briefing that I would fully support. The criminal code at this point deals with, for instance, harassing telephone messages. This bill would, we're told, because I haven't had a chance to read it, expand that to allow action against cyberbullying for repetitive and harassing internet messages. That makes sense to me. But the requirement that internet providers are to be able to give specific personal information without warrant to anyone who's requesting it, to me is still an invasion of privacy. I await with great interest to hear what the commissioners, Jennifer Stoddard at the federal level and Commissioner Kavukian at the Ontario level, will think of the revisions that have been brought in with this.
That's the title, an attempt to mislead members of Parliament, you think?
I think, having just come from a briefing where they told us that the name of the act is the Protecting Children from Internet Predators Act, and then picking up an act that isn't called that, I'd like to ask Minister Taves what the name of his bill is. I certainly hope it is not the Protecting Children from Internet Predators Act, because I find it deeply offensive that to be concerned about civil liberties in this country and the protection of